Sure, you can get some information on how to write a press release from a public relations assistant or person in advertising or anything like that. But wouldn't it be more useful to know what publishers and editors are looking for in the press releases that they receive? We'll be into that immediately on this episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which of course is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Mendon-Honeoye Falls-Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome to today's edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, as the man said, and we're going to be talking about press releases today. You all know what press releases are. Press releases are how you go out and actively engage the media to try to get them to talk more about you. Now, you could be a business, you could be a nonprofit, you could be a civic association, you could be pretty much anything, and your objective is to get some information out there to the public that describes who you are and what you do. Now, let's go over those objectives for a moment, because I think that they're pretty important. You need to realize at the very beginning, you need to embrace what it is you're trying to achieve. So to do that, we need to identify the objectives that you're seeking and maybe why you're seeking them. There are three main objectives and two sort of secondary objectives that you can have when you're going out there and seeking publicity. The first objective is pretty simple, just to get awareness, just to get people to understand who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and get your name out there. The more often people hear your name, the more likely they're to remember it. And that's really an important objective. The second thing that you want to do is achieve some sense of credibility. The more that you're published or that you appear in the media, the more likely people will say, hey, you're an expert. You know what you're talking about. This product is important. This organization has a bearing in our community. It builds up the credibility. And finally, the thing you might want to do with public relations or some sort of press is to achieve a level of persuasion, to convince people to do a certain thing, to donate to a certain cause, to buy a particular product. That's really what you want to achieve ultimately with this public relations campaign. Now, I'll tell you there's a couple of other things, and we'll get to why in a second, that are important. These are secondary things. If done properly, your press release, your engagement, your notices that appear in whatever form of media you do can be used as references, and it can also be used as citations. Both of those are important if you have a strategy that goes beyond the standard media and into the other forms of media that you might be looking at. So what are these media opportunities, and how could you really take advantage of them in the best way? Or should you? That's a good question that a lot of people ask, and it's something that we need to go over to determine where you're going to put your resources, where best it might be to focus on, and the answer isn't what most people expect. The list of media opportunities really differs from area to area, but very broadly, it starts with the thing with perhaps the largest local reach, which is television, followed by radio. Then there's print, which is newspapers, and we have the two internet versions. One is the online news, which comes from legitimate news organizations, and social media. So let's take a look at these 5 opportunities and try to differentiate between them and why it might be more important for you to focus on one of them rather than maybe the one that you think you're going to want. So most people want to go on television. Television is what everyone sees. It's great. It's there. And, wow, hey, I was on TV. How many people want to say that? Here's the problem. Everybody wants to be on TV. The competition to get on the evening news or one of those feature shows that they have throughout the day is very tough. It's very rigorous. Producers on TV shows are the equivalent of editors on newspapers. Producers are really looking for the kind of shows or the kind of news that is going to meet an objective that they have. And the objective that they have is to get as many eyeballs watching their show as possible. What does that mean? Well, if you come from a small town or if you have a very small market, you're not really going to be attractive to the television. Now, if you have an enormous event, a once in a lifetime event in your small community, certainly that will attract some attention. But for the most part, TV's tough to get into initially. I'll tell you a little way how you can sneak into TV at the national level in a moment. Radio is like TV. Radio is also harder to get into, mostly because most radio productions are coming from a national organization now. It's no longer local. By the way, television is the same thing. If you try to get on national TV, it's even harder to get on the local TV. Radio is the same thing, since most of the production is national. There are local shows, and if you fit within the framework of a local show, you're definitely in the position to try out to get on there. But again, it's tough. There's a limited amount of time, limited space, and just like TV, they're looking for the most ears. So you have to have some sort of constituency that will have a reason to go and listen to what you're going to say on the radio. A funny story, an odd story, that actually works. So even if it's a local story that has a kind of flavor that appeals to everyone, might be a good way to get into radio. Now here's the issue with radio that is, and also to some extent with TV. If you're going to use these things for, say, promoting your materials, putting in your promotional materials, those are generally print materials that you send to your audience, to your prospects, to your market, to the people who you want to donate to your cause. TV and radio don't really do well in terms of print. You can quote yourself from TV, but it's really not the same impact as a newspaper article or a magazine article. So print is often the most attractive way for you to get publicity in a way that you can then put that into your marketing collateral. Now, here's the thing about print. Just like TV is looking for major audiences, major print publications are also looking for big audiences. So they want to go where the readers are most likely to be interested. If you've got a small town story, it's going to be tough to get into metropolitan newspaper. But that doesn't mean you can't get in print. Throughout the Western New York region, there are literally dozens of community papers. They publish once a week. They don't have a large staff, and they're looking for content to put into their paper. It is really easy to get into those papers. I mean, short of, there are some things you can't do, which we'll get into in the second half of the show. But for the most part, if you do want to get media attention, the place to start is in the local newspaper, the one that is closest to where you are. Chances are you'll know the editor or the publisher or anybody else who's working with that paper, so it'll be easier to get in. They'll know who you are. They won't suspect what you're sending them is fake news or just self-promotion. So that's a good thing to get into. Now, the other forms of media are online, either through the online news or social media. Between the two, obviously, legitimate news organizations are going to be more attractive than social media. Social media is actually something that you can control to some extent, but it doesn't have the same credibility that a news organization does. You will find that many of the news organizations, even the small town newspapers, have online news outlets. They have their own websites. They might not print, say, all their articles, but they'll print the bigger articles. And that's going to be important when you get down to the next thing, which is what are your reasons for doing it, which actually goes back to the first thing. Let's go back to that first slide for a second. You notice how I put down citations and references? So if you have an online citation, an online news story that's printed there, you can now link to that. Why is that important? Well, certainly you can email that out, but if you've got a strategy that involves creating and maintaining a Wikipedia page, Wikipedia wants to have credible references from news organizations. So if you have a news story through your press release that comes out in the local newspaper, and the local newspaper puts it onto their website, that's now something that you could cite in your article, in your Wikipedia page, and actually link to. Now, the fact is you do not have to link to something on the Wikipedia page to have credibility. You could be in a newspaper or a TV show that doesn't post it to the web, and you just cite it the same way you always do. So it's that credibility that you gain from citations and references that makes the opportunity more important for the media. Now let's quickly go over, because I'm going to get into this in a little bit more detail when we have a chance after the break. Let's go into what the editors are looking at, what the editors and producers are looking at. We're going to focus mostly in on newspapers right now because that's the lowest hanging fruit. That's the easiest thing for you to get into. So when you approach an editor, the editor is going to look for a number of things. And the very first thing that the editor is looking for is relevance. Is this story a story my readers want to read? And if it passes that test, then it goes down to the other test. Now, usually it's the editor's job to put all this information together. But your purpose in writing a good press release is to do as much of the editor's job as possible. You want to make it as easy as it can be for the editor to just go and put your copy right into the paper. Now, there might be some changes. Don't worry about grammar and punctuation like that. Editors can take that. But the message, the narrative, is what you want across. And you've got to know how to think like an editor in order to make this handy. So the very first thing after relevance is the headline. What's the headline say? Because the headline is what most people read. They might not even read the paper, the rest of the story. They'll read the headline and they'll infer from the headline what the story is about. So the headline not only has to get their attention, the headline has to draw them in, make them want to read what's next. After the headline is the picture. This is particularly true of small town papers. They want to have a picture with faces in it. They don't want to see a product. They don't want to see a logo. They want to see people. They want to see people that their readers will recognize. And the more you have, the merrier it is. So it's important to have a picture with people, not out-of-towners. I mean, if it's an out-of-towner, if you've got an out-of-town guest coming in, you want to promote that, have that out-of-town guest pose with, say, like the chapter president or whoever the local individual is that represents the group that's putting out the press release. That's what you want in the picture. Followed by the picture is the caption. So the caption is sort of like a subhead, a subheadline, which, by the way, you can also have. But the caption is the next thing that people are most likely to look at. And if the caption doesn't just say so-and-so's in the picture, you might want to have a little bit of a tease in the caption that gets them to read the body. The last thing of priority is the body itself. Now, the editor will look at the body to make sure that it passes journalistic muster. And we'll get into what that's about in a moment. So right now I wanted to just go back to where we were, recap what we're doing. We're talking about how to write a press release that reporters will read, reporters or editors. You want to make that press release very compelling, very interesting. Why is this important? Well, we'll find out after this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, and today we're talking about press releases. And I'll tell you something, I'm the kind of person that you're writing the press releases for. Not only do I publish the newspaper that's actually behind me, but I also write trade journals and I write for national magazines. I get pitches from PR people all the time. Hundreds a day, literally. Most of them end up in the trash. I don't even look at them. Why? I mean, there's probably some good ones that end up in the trash, but quite frankly, I get so many I don't have the time to look at all of them. So it's very important, if you're going to be sending something to someone like me, that you grab my attention right away. That's what you want to do. So we're going to go over 5 steps that you're going to need to do to really get the best out of the press releases that you send out. I call this the 5-step writing process. And this isn't necessarily mine. A lot of people have written about this, and this is sort of consolidated down into some easy to see steps that you'll see. And by the way, at the end, I'll give you some books that you might want to read that talk about this. Some very specifically talk about these 5 steps. Others talk about just portions of these steps that you're going to want to get into. So what are these 5 steps and why are they important? Very quickly, you want to grab people's attention. That's the very first thing that you want to do. You want to make sure when they see the headline, when they see the picture, that it's something that draws them into the article. When you're sending this to a reporter, same thing. So whatever works for people will work for the reporter. Why? Because the reporter or editor has to think like the reader or the viewer. And you need to be able to think like the reader or viewer too. And there'll be a couple of quick steps that you can probably go to when I go over the books. I'll show you which books are good for this. The second thing you want to do is you want to show people. You want to, in effect, demonstrate what it is that you're talking about. If it's a product, you're going to talk about what that product does. If it's an organization, a civic association, you're going to say what they're doing right now, what the event is that they're having it right now. The next really part is you want to prove that. Well, or another way to look at it is you answer the question why. You know, why is this thing important that you just showed? Why is it important to go to this event? Why is this product important to your life? Why is this idea important for you to think about and maybe embrace? So it's not, you're not persuading at this point. That comes next. You're really just proving the soundness of what you're doing. So for example, hey, we're having a bowling tournament to support the local charity. So it supports, this is the difference between proving and persuading is this. This bowling tournament is going to bring in money. And that money is going to be donated to the local charity. It's that easy. The proof of that in that particular situation is just easy. Is that easy? The persuasion is a little bit different. So once you've proven that people that money going to the bowling tournament is going to go to the local tournament, to local charity, now you have to persuade people that it's important to them. So you do it 2 ways. You say why, in this particular case, you say, why is this charity important? The charity is important because It helps people who are in need. And it's very important that people who have the means help people who are in need. So now we get to the next thing, which is to persuade why you should do it. So certainly you're somebody who has the means, or else you wouldn't be reading this article. And don't you think it's important? Weren't you brought up in a certain way that has you really, you're maybe compelled, or you're expected to share the things that you have? Come and share and have fun, and then you could go bowling and do this all at once. So there you go. So you've got this obligation, your civic obligation, that's persuading you. You've got this fun element, so you're going to have some fun. So the persuasion can go in any number of different ways. If it's a product, it's almost a little bit easier. You show the product, hey, look, here, I've got this little widget here. This widget is great because it does X, Y, and Z. And now I'm going to actually prove it to you that it works. I'll show you what the product is, then I'm going to actually demonstrate how it works. And you'll see for yourself that the thing really works. It slices it, dices it all, does this great things. Now, wouldn't it be more convenient for you? So notice how I switched into the persuasion thing. And wouldn't it be more convenient for you to do this? And then finally, you want to end with some sort of ask. Because ultimately, you want somebody to do whatever it is that the press release is talking about. It could be sign up and register to go to the bowling tournament. Or it could be, if you're interested in knowing more about this product, going here. Now here's where most press releases fail. So when I've been talking, I've actually kind of been making the same error myself, the way that I'm talking about it, is I'm actually doing a sales pitch. This isn't a news story. This is a sales pitch. So what you've got to do is you've got to take away the sales pitch and put in the news story. So the news story is very simple. So who, what, why, where, and when. The thing that you learn in high school about how to write anything, a persuasive essay or a report, anything like that. You've got to be able to answer those questions. Now you can answer those questions in a way that really fits the news. So first of all, there's got to be a news element to it. Remember, go back here. The editor's looking for relevance, number one. So coming out with a new product is kind of like a news story. But in of itself, that's not a really great news story. Anybody could come out with a new product. But if you had a product that, let's say that the product was used by somebody in the community to do a great thing. So let's say that you had let's say that you were a farmer and a car ran off the road, and you got your big old John Deere tractor and pulled that car out of the road. Well, if you're John Deere, you're going to make that into a news story. So John Deere tractor is really part of the news story, but the news story is a heroic farmer saves a car that ran off the road. So that's relevance. That is talking about your product, and it's done in a way that really gets people interested in it. So what do you ask at the end in that particular case? Say, do you want to be a hero? Learn how to be a hero. Now, if you're John Deere, you're a big company, learn how to be a hero. Go to our website and we'll tell you more heroic stories. So again, that is something that may or may not get into the newspaper. You want to put it in the press release, because some newspapers will say, hey, you know what? That's pretty interesting. We don't want to cover all these particular hero stories. We think our readers might be interested in it. So go ahead and send them to the website. Now, don't think it's going to always work, because most editors, most producers will have a rule that says we're not going to put the company's website on there. It works actually easier for civic organizations because they're generally considered nonprofit and the media is a little bit friendlier to them. So you want to keep that in mind when you're doing this. Is don't over promote yourself, particularly if you're a for-profit entity. You want to try to be as selfless and as helpful as possible. Now let's go back to our main slide here and see if we can get our books up. So there's a few books that I wanted to bring your attention to, and they're going to help you in a variety of ways. The first group of books that I call the basic group of books. So these are books that you can read that will help you, particularly in this 5-step writing process, know what you should emphasize. Victor Schwab wrote this book. By the way, these are old books. Well, no, these are only old books. The next set of books are old books. But these are basic books. How to Write a Good Advertisement by Victor Schwab. It's a copywriting course, in a sense. And again, I'm saying you're going to have to learn to write like a journalist, not like a copywriter. But the fact is, old school copywriting and journalism aren't that different. If you go back to old advertisements where it was almost all print and you read that, they're compelling stories. And sort of like, let's talk to the book on the right, Ogilvy on Advertising. This is a very famous book, and it talks about elements that he used in his advertising to grab the viewer's attention or the reader's attention. So that's the same thing to do. The thing about the Ogilvy book is that it's important in maybe learning how to do pictures well. Now, the one thing, and Ogilvy says this right at the beginning of the book, you're not doing this just to be creative. You're doing this to get people to act in some way. And at this point, the picture is designed to get people to read the article. So you want to get people to stare at the picture. You want to use the caption in a way that then lures the people into the body, into the text of the article. Now, this book in the middle, remember those two books on the other side are essentially advertising books. The book in the middle bridges advertising and good nonfiction writing, reporting writing. In fact, this book was used, it's from the University of Oklahoma, written by Walter S. Campbell. He was a pretty prolific writer, not just about these types of books, but he also wrote Western books. And his book is actually referenced both in journalism and in advertising. That's how effective it is. And this is a hard to find book, but you can get it still at the library. The book it identifies a series of courses and steps that you can take and do to improve your writing. So if you want to hone your skills as a writer, then this is definitely a book that you want to get. The other books really are looking at it purely from the advertising standpoint. They're a little bit easier to read. Writing nonfiction, that's literally a college course. That was at least literally a college course because Walter Campbell taught this at college. The next series of books I call the advanced books. Now, these books are old books, and they'll give you a sense for what people are thinking of, what motivates people. Because when you're trying to get people to do something, including read your article or print your article, you need to know what their motivations are. Claude Hopkins is often considered, say, the father of copywriting, the person who really did it right at the very first time. He's famous for a variety of ads, including, well, they're so old you probably don't know them. But his approach really took the attention away from pure marketing in terms of the product and brought it down to the level of the reader. Now, most of his advertisings are all reading, so that's why he did it. So he talked about things that the everyday person wanted to hear. And when you write the press release, when a reporter is looking at it, that's how you have to think. You are very amazed and enthralled with your product or your organization, but no one else is. And let's face it. The point is to get that word out there, just to let it do it and drip, drip, drip it, so eventually people are amazed. You can't go for a home run on this. You got to think of hitting singles, steady singles. Reality in Advertising is a seminal book by Rover Reeves, and he is the one who talked about unique selling proposition. So he'll show you how he got everything narrowed down to a single statement that helped you better understand what it is that you were trying to, in effect, sell to people or tell to people. So that's an important book. This last book here actually has more of a Western New York relevance in it, and that is Elmer Wheeler is actually a native of Rochester, New York. And some of the stories that he tells in this book, you'll recognize the street names of where he's from, because he grew up here. And but here's the real reason why you know him. You know him because you've heard the phrase, selling the sizzle, not the steak. Well, Elmer Wheeler is the one who invented that. In fact, he was called one of the greatest salesmen ever. He was nationally known. He made his name ultimately down in Texas where he moved to, but he still told the stories about growing up in Rochester. He used a form of scientific testing to help him identify the best sentences and words and phrases to use. This is important for your headline, for grabbing the attention of the reporter, of the reader, of the editor, whoever it is that you're sending the press release to. So I think that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to do in this short, very short version of how to write a good press release. Certainly there's more that could be said on this, and in fact there's probably a whole course that you could take that will help you write a better press release. If you want to know more about, say, what we talk about each week, it's not just about business, it's not just about writing, it's also about history, nature, science, politics, anything that happens in the greater Western New York area. You can be a live audience member just by going to stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com and putting in your name so that you can be invited to the show. With that, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we hope to see you not next week, because next week's Thanksgiving, we'll be taking that week off, but after that. So bye-bye for now.